Hey there, Gemini. So how are you doing? This is the next 2-week forecast taking us from the new moon in Taurus on the 27th of April right the way through to the full moon in Scorpio on the 12th of May. Now, this I think is a slightly more, I don't want to say laid back because it's definitely not laid back, but there's a slight change of pace. You know, this 2-week period leading up to the new moon, I think, has been super duper intense. As we come into this new moon, we've got the full, concise, exact Pluto and Mars opposition, which has been brewing really from the end of October last year. You know, it's come into the opposition, it's eased out of the opposition, it's gone back in. This is the last time out of the 3 occasions of this opposition. I've tracked that back, you know, with Mars and Pluto oppositions. And the last time we had a Mars-Pluto opposition in 3 parts was back in 2007 to 2008. It's a long time ago. It's almost a North Node cycle ago, like a whole cycle of, the North Node going from Pisces to Pisces. So this is quite an interesting time. There may well be some mirrored themes going on, by the way. But anyway, this 2-week period starting on the new moon, I think this new moon is actually quite purposeful and also quite fiery. You know, we are absolutely pulled, you know, really to our maximum, and hopefully in that comes this big sense of release, which is usually what happens with a new moon. And then as we're coming up to the full moon, the sun and the moon, the sun is in a conjunction with Uranus, and Uranus is in opposition to moon. So that is likely to be quite unpredictable. But in between these 2 dates, there's not too many really hard and fast, really directive kind of aspects going on. You know, we've actually got a little bit of a respite, which I think is really great. Anyway, let's I'm going to bring the slides on in just a minute, but just want to say, if you're new to this channel, hi, my name is Louisa Tanner Munson. Feel Good Astrology, from my point of view, is just to share astrology in such a way that it might lift you up, that you might get to see what's coming up and choose how you want to feel in that. You know, so I'm talking about this like great big opposition that's kind of pulling us apart, but there are opportunities in that. You know, we don't have to feel pulled apart, but anywhere where maybe we've been playing with polarities in our life, anywhere where we've been feeling like stressed out, hopefully the way I deliver astrology is to help you through it and help you beyond it, so that you don't have to be a victim of the planets. And that's really what I'm about here. If you've just come back, thanks a lot. I really appreciate you coming to Feel Good Astrology and seeing what happens. So let's bring these slides up. First thing I just want to sort of show you really is, overall in this 2-week period, we're going from the new moon, which is when the moon is at its darkest, all the way, or that's how it appears to us. Obviously the moon doesn't change color, but that's how we perceive it. All the way to the full moon when it's at its brightest, or that's how we see it. So we are on the maybe dark to light trajectory, you know, where everything is coming from the mystery, and the new moon is a seed point. It's a moment where there's like a sense of freshness and a clean slate. That's where we're really starting from. And then over the 2 weeks, we're going to be adding some new things in. Hopefully, if we're manifesting from that new moon energy, you know, we'll be thinking, okay, I've cleaned the slates, I've learned a lesson from this last moon cycle, and here's what I want to manifest in this month ahead. And so in the first 2 weeks, the first week in particular, up until the first quarter, that is 1 week roughly, you know, we're normally creating from a sense of something we're intuiting. We're tuning into our feelings. It's not so direct, but this is a growth period. The waxing moon phase is where the moon appears to grow from this little slither to half a moon to almost a full moon to a full moon. It reminds me of an advertising campaign from years ago with what are they called, those little chocolate covered biscuits. Oh, that's got me thinking now, and also craving. But anyway, so yeah, this is about laying foundations, first of all, in your imagination, and really from a place of mystery. And then in the second part of this forecast week, in week 2, you're starting to really gather pace and to actually take proper action to make sure the things you're wanting to manifest, you can bring about. So there we go. And then as we end this 2-week period, I always find at the time of the full moon, where everything is fully illuminated. If you remember, the moon is about our psyche and our emotions. I think it can be quite overwhelming because often lots of things that we've created the energy for are flying at us. Anything that we've not dealt with, anything that's been left to fester, oh boy, does it come up around the time of the full moon. So that's just to give you an idea of the sort of energy flow. In terms of a diary, the new moon is on Sunday, the 27th. And, these go pretty much every 2 weeks. Sometimes, it looks like it's slightly over a 2-week period. The third quarter, the halfway point is on the 4th of May. Now, in this first week, like in the last couple of cycles, we've had lots of really big conjunctions, in particular we've got this conjunction coming up, Venus in a conjunction to Neptune. It's a big conjunction. It usually happens once a year. Only this year it's happened quite a few times. So this will be the third time. But we've got a series, and you'll see this in a minute when I bring the charts up. We've got a load of planets really in a tight space. And so as they're moving past each other and then retrograding, it just seems it's like conjunction after conjunction. But we're coming into a place with a bit more space now, not so many big aspects. So really in the first week, the major sort of new energy coming in is Venus going into Aries. Venus has been exalted in the sign of Pisces. She likes being in the sign of Pisces, but Venus coming into Aries, I think we're all going to really take the bull by the horns, although that's an analogy for Taurus. We are essentially being a lot more forthright in how we're relating to people. We're being a lot more passionate, a lot more forceful than usual, which is kind of interesting. And then the conjunction with Neptune. This is the first conjunction between Venus and Neptune in the sign of Aries. And over the next 14 years or so, whilst Neptune goes through Aries, every Venus-Neptune conjunction is going to be in the sign of Aries. And I think this is significant because, for the last 14 years when they got together, it was in Pisces. Venus and Neptune coming together, they both deal with the love vibration. Venus is very terrestrial, earthbound, and Neptune is very cosmic. And so you've got like the lower love, the higher love. And they're both very creative. So them coming together, I always see as almost like a fairy godmother wish, because you're really tuning into what feels good and feels loving and feels creative, really what's coming from your soul at a real sort of incarnated level and, the next level up. And in the sign of Pisces, of course, they've been very magical. But I think the time for magic and mystery has almost passed. Venus in a conjunction to Neptune, this is us taking direct action to make our dreams come true. So I think this is a pretty stunning thing, actually. On the 4th of May, that's the day when things like change around. We've then got Mercury in a sextile to Jupiter. So we've got some sextiles coming in. They're useful building blocks, Mercury and Jupiter. Very much. It's interesting because, they both rule opposing signs. Jupiter rules Sagittarius and Pisces, and then Mercury rules Gemini and Virgo. They're completely opposite. But them working together, I think, is useful. There's an opportunity to spread your messages, to make everything seem a lot bigger than it may be. So there's a feeling of optimism in the communications and the friendships we've got. Then the following day on the 6th, Venus in a sextile to Pluto is really helpful. It's quite sexy as well. Venus, she's not just a lover, but I mean, she is quite, she can be very sensuous and erotic. And with Pluto, which is quite controlling, but also very deep, like feeling things really deep, I think we're really tuning into what feels strong for us. I like that. Mercury in a conjunction to Chiron is a time when we can articulate what's going on for us at a deep wounded level. We can really tune into it and and know what's going on. We might even catch ourselves out in some of our usual patterns because we can hear ourselves like talking ourselves into it. And then Mercury going into Taurus. And then obviously we've got the full moon in Scorpio. So, this is a much easier 2-week period than the other ones that we've had in recent times. So just before we bring the charts up, I just want to say a big hello, put a shout out to everybody that supports this channel in all the various ways that you do. I really love you and appreciate you. You make a difference. I would do what I do anyway, but you are so absolutely helping me do this. So thank you. So these are the 3 charts that I'm looking at. The new moon in Taurus. And this is all from a Gemini perspective. And I should say, this is for you if you're a Gemini sun, but also more importantly, I think, as a Gemini ascendant. You can look at this from both perspectives. But, I've set this chart so it really has a strong Gemini identity. And I'm using a sort of whole sign or a whole, I'm literally doing one sign per house. To make it as clear and as easy as possible. Now, if you're really good at astrology, you might use a different house system. You might use Placidus or something like that. But I'm just trying to make this as useful to as many people as possible. So the new moon in Taurus, there it is. It's showing up in this sort of 12th house area. This is a place of imagination and psychic energy and kind of helping you to take what's unconscious inside you and make it conscious. So with a new moon, I think you're getting the chance to really see what's going on internally and do something about it. That's a nice idea, that you get a new start. Now, this is quite a strong new moon because it's in a T-square with Pluto and Mars. Now, I mentioned at the start that they have been in opposition for quite some time. The exact oppositions were the 3rd of November, the 3rd of January, and then on the 27th of April. So this is a long time these two have been in opposition or kind of in and out of that opposition. And they are really pulling at the ideas of survival and what we need to feel not safe, but feel like we're defending. Mars in particular is showing where you might want to take action to feel like you're thriving. And for you, this is really at the community level. How can you feel like you're protected within your community, like you're taking action within your community, like you're free to take action in your community, in fact. And then Pluto up here, I think is possibly showing you where you have fear coming from the outside. Like what is the outside representing to you? Does everything outside of your community look a bit threatening? Pluto often shows us where we have fears, but it also shows where we're trying to control those fears. So to me, I think there's a big piece here about your safety, your feelings of safety where you live and within the community or the sort of people that you hang around. But I'll come back to this in a minute. But this is the first chart I'm looking at. Then we've got the mid one at the first moon quarter phase, where by that time the moon has come down here and is really still in this pattern, because the sun is still just connected to Mars in a square, so that's still going on, and obviously the moon is kind of activating that. And around the first moon quarter phase, the moon will have also gone into an opposition with Pluto, which Mars still is maintaining. So we've still got a similar level of tension going on, interestingly. But look at all these lovely trines and these sextiles. They're really showing that even though there's a lot of tension going on, there is still the opportunity to change. So I do think, in this first example, you can see there's support systems, from these trines, these blue lines, the short ones and the long ones. They're all helpful. They're building blocks of support. They're showing you where you've got access to make some amendments, to make things change, to have a bit of flow with that. And as you can see, there's more coming in around the first quarter moon phase. So there's a lot more. I think the patterns that you're in are taking a stronger shape. If you see, that is showing kind of a broad level of support. But at this point, things seem to have a much stronger, sharper picture. And then the last chart, and you'll see that the moon will move around here in Scorpio and be in opposition to the sun. That's the time of the full moon in Scorpio. Let's have a look at that. Yeah, there you'll see it. We've still got quite a strong, strident pattern, but still lots of levels of support. And the support has changed because of the way the moon's checking in with all the other planets. So that's what I'm looking at. Let me just go back. So really what I see for you in this 2-week period is you're moving from this, like on the new moon in Taurus, this sense that something has got to change. You're able to access what's going on in your unconscious mind and maybe realize where you've got some self-sabotage going on. And Uranus so like right at the end of your start, like this is kind of like the start of your story and this is like the end of your story, like Uranus sort of limbering up, getting ready to go into your own sign, I think is a real indication that there are some quite shocking things that you've maybe ignored or not looked at that are coming up to surprise you. Uranus can really show us where we have things that come up. You know, sometimes like you might get a burp that suddenly comes up and you're not quite expecting it, but all of a sudden you feel this pressure come up and it has to come out through your mouth. Or if you're farting the other way, you know, there is this feeling of wind or pressure, something moving from deep inside you to come up to be released. You know, I think this is not necessarily what's going on in your body, but there's something deep inside that is like, listen up, you need to see this, you need to experience this. So you might not be able to put your finger on it necessarily, but there is something wanting to come through and to come into the light of day. You know, this part of the chart is really associated with the dead of night, you know, like where you can't see it, very much like the new moon, in fact, which is, you know, in a time of darkness and mystery. So there is something coming up in you. And I think this Pluto and Mars opposition is giving you the necessary sort of tension to be able to see it and recognize it so that you can allow it to come up into the light of day. So that's the first thing. Now, it shouldn't be a complete accident, you know, or a complete surprise. You'd have had murmurs of this for quite some time because Uranus has been working beautifully with Pluto for quite some time in this long-term trine energy, really showing that things are working out to transform your experience, you know, to really show you from understanding that we can't actually control what's going on in the world, or, you know, out there, you know, out in space, out in politics, out in, you know, the fields of money and abundance and stuff. You know, there's actually not much we can do aside from look after ourselves. And so any kind of fears that are coming up about where you might feel vulnerable by, you know, what's going on out there, I think it is most likely coming up. But you might think that your fears are absolutely justified because look at this, look at this, look at this, look at this. But what this is really showing you is what's going on underneath. You know, was there an original fear that all of this has been kind of set on? I.e., if you'd never had a fear for your safety or never had a moment where you realize that people were quite crappy and you lost trust in people, maybe what you see in the world, you wouldn't see in the same way. So I'm not justifying anything that's going on, by the way, but you know, what I'm seeing here is this moment of realization that things can come up and out, and that the things that appear to scare you and frighten you might be there to motivate you to see what was trapped and has been trapped inside you for so long. So this is really helping things out. You know, there's a lot of movement between your 10th and the 11th house, really saying that if you've been really doing your career, how you stand in the world, and, you know, your own form of leadership, you know, how you show yourself to be a responsible adult and stuff, if you've been doing that quite on your own and in a sort of creative way and whatnot, you know, how that's transforming right now and will be transforming for quite some time is you're coming into a time of shared energy. You're not having to have it all on your own shoulders. And I think that's another change that's coming up. But again, that's really encouraging you to trust everyone around you, or to come into a deeper level of trust. And of course, I don't think you can do that until you trust yourself. So it's so many big patterns going on right now, Gemini. You know, and as you come to the midpoint on the 4th of May, what I think is really showing up is you realize that, I think, to build a stronger trust in your community, you're going to have to do something yourself. In particular around the 4th of May, it feels like it's time for you to roll up your sleeves a little bit and get a little bit more involved. Almost like the more you get involved, the more trust grows. So it's very easy to feel unsupported and out of the picture when you don't actually get into the picture. So to me, this is you rolling up your sleeves and really getting involved. And when you do that, I can see loads and loads of benefits coming in. You realize actually that there are people who might have a really sort of people that might be quite powerful, but powerful in a way that you can process. There's a lot of support coming in. Now, one of the things that may stop that support, Jupiter is going through your first house, has been for quite some time. And when that happens, every time Jupiter comes through this part of our chart, every sort of 11, more like 12 years, just slightly less than 12 years, we are kind of coming up in the world a little bit. And so it can be a time when we get a little bit inflated. And so what I really see here is, when you're focusing on your inflation, things are a little bit difficult with new friends and new networks. But when you're putting your sleeves up and reducing the inflation of yourself, things work really, really well. So I think there is this like coming out of the 10th where you have to be the authority, but coming into the community. The community is the real key, I think, for you. And if you're not comfortable with that, it might be because you're in the wrong community. So as we're coming into the full moon in Scorpio, the moon is really in this sort of manifested part of the chart, really showing that, throughout this 2-week period, however, whatever has come up for you as a concern in the background, ultimately this 2-week period has helped you see it in the light of day, in the cold light of day, and see what's going on. The moon here is really illuminating back to you, or mirroring back to you, maybe where you're not taking enough action, because you've been a little bit lost in cyberspace or inside your own emotional troubles and turmoils. But the moon coming out here in the sign of Scorpio is really kind of almost like a slap in the face. If you see someone in an old fashioned film, like you see someone faint, with shock or something, and you see someone slapping them around the face, going, wake up, wake up. So this full moon does feel a bit like a jolt to the system, where you're kind of shaken back to your reality. And so there's the idea that you've been out of the community and you're stepping back into the community. But there's also the idea that you've maybe been a bit detached from what's going on. And as you're coming into the time of the full moon, there's a kind of shaking out of any numbness that you've been going through. So yeah, I think this is a time of revelations. So it's, it's a time of coming into a new sense of what's going on, and coming out of anywhere where you've decided it's safer to be numb and safer not to feel anything. And so you've kind of distracted yourself and detached. Really, I think what's going on now, you're realizing that actually when you are a bit detached, actually that's more treacherous. And so you're starting to come back closer and closer and closer into the now moment and into your physical body. So yeah, I see this as a big waking up, but also a bit like a shaking up for you. So I hope that's helpful. Now, you might want to go a bit deeper. Each time I do these forecasts, I also do 2 extra forecasts for you, Gemini, for this whole period. And one of them is to talk about what's going on for you, love, in your relationships, not just your love relationships or sexual relationships, but in terms of your friendships, your family, and so on and so forth. I also do look at your career. And obviously not just your career, but the whole idea of how you earn money, receive money, where you might be able to help yourself, to get a little bit further, and so on and so forth. So, if you're interested in that, then you might consider investing in membership with me, because that's a perk that I offer people that are supporting this channel. And if that's of interest, you get 1 week's free trial, so you can try it and see if it suits you. It's $22 a month. And what you get is a fortnightly relationship and connections forecast, and also a fortnightly career and ambitions forecast. So, you get the extra bits that really flesh out this forecast that I've just given you. There's also one complimentary community hangout each month. So we had ours last night, and we were looking at each other's charts and noticing patterns exist. So, for instance, the people that are in our lives, also the important dates that have come up in our life, and seen where they fall in our birth charts. And so we do different things like that. Like what the community's asking for. We'll hang out for an hour or two, and just talk about that as a group. Once you're through once you've gone through the week free trial and you've decided to commit, then you also are able to get a discount to any readings or courses, or also webinars. So if that is something that you've been considering, like you wanted a consultation with me, then again, this might help you. And there's lots of other bits as well, because you can form friendships and things. So if that sounds like something that might be useful to you, then just go to, and you'll see the link in the description field, but just go to www.school, that's SKOOL, school.com/feelgood astrology. And obviously you get to interact with me a bit there. I don't really get time to interact with people on the in the comments on my videos anymore, which I do regret. But within membership, I do get a chance to really talk with people that actually want to interact with a Feel Good community. So anyway, there you go. I hope that's helpful to you to navigate the next 2 weeks ahead, and to prepare you a little bit for the next one, because obviously this keeps on going. So yeah, and my final thought is just what was going on 18 years ago for you? Just because that's the last time that Pluto and Mars were doing this long-term kind of battle, so there is something that's going to be revealed in these 2 weeks about how you can feel much safer and feel empowered to move forward. So that's sort of the thought I'm going to leave you on. But anyway, loads and loads of love to you, Gemini. Take care, and catch you another time.